Hello, my name is Justin DeClue. I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And this week, we're talking about Robert Downey Sr., a prince.
Record scratch. Yes, that's right. We are not talking about Chaplin himself, Robert Downey Jr. We are instead talking about his father, the famous, or the once famous, underground filmmaker, somebody who rode New York's avant-garde film scene like a colossus in the mid to late 60s and early 70s.
Wow, 2 whole decades!
And someone whose critical reputation has ebbed and flowed over the years. I think he was, for a while, long forgotten. He, in the 80s and 90s, made some kind of bad comedies, but his reputation got a bit of a jolt about a decade ago when Criterion put out a box set of a number of his early films through their Eclipse label. And Vinegar Syndrome recently did a beautiful Blu-ray edition of his magnum opus, the one that everyone likes, PUTNEY SWOPE.
Robert Downey Sr. is a guy that I saw PUTNEY SWOPE, I liked it, and I don't think I revisited any of his other films because most people would say, oh no, those aren't good. But we decided to dive in because maybe all of those people are wrong.
Well, about 10 years ago, I had myself a little Robert Downey Sr. marathon when the Eclipse box set came out. I watched all those films. I watched Babbo 73, Chafed Elbows, No More Excuses, and I can't remember what I thought of them.
Maybe they were so good that you forgot them because then you couldn't enjoy other entertainment.
But here's the thing. I also, about 10 years ago, dipped into his later career. I saw his final fiction film, Hugo Pool, starring Alyssa Milano. In some circles, his most famous film, Up the Academy, the sole feature film venture of Mad Magazine.
That's the only reason it's famous, is that, whoa, Mad Magazine tried to rip off National Lampoons and they made a movie?
And Robert Downey Sr. does have a bit of a cult reputation. Paul Thomas Anderson is a big fan, for example. In fact, you can see Robert Downey Sr. in the movie Boogie Nights doing a cameo as the owner of the record studio where Dirk Diggler records his album. Also, the character of Buck Swope, played by Don Cheadle, is named after Putney. I also know that the late Louis C.K.
rest in peace,
cited PUTNEY SWOPE as one of his greatest artistic inspirations, and it was a huge influence on his film Pootie Tang. So he definitely has fans.
I mean, a man who makes a film that everybody enjoys, like PUTNEY SWOPE, how could he have an entire career of films that are not as good as PUTNEY SWOPE?
I suggested this topic. I went into this week expecting and wanting to love Robert Downey Sr. My memory of these early films, to the extent that I had a memory of them, was that they were fun and anarchic. And, imagine, okay, you were in lower Manhattan in the 1960s and you were going to the underground film landscape and you are just getting a little tired of seeing abstract and geometric forms on the screen. You're a little tired of Stan Brakhage.
Oh, do I have to stare at this person's face for another hour?
Yeah. You don't want to watch the Empire State Building for 8 hours. Maybe you want to have a little bit of fun. And here come these movies, very influenced by like the Marx Brothers, very Mad Magazine in their sense of humor, off the wall, anarchic, the kind of movies that you might smoke something before you go see them.
So what you're trying to do is set the stage of these movies are played within the context of people not having many laughs watching some Stan Brakhage, and then boom, you get something like Chafed Elbows, and woo, there's actual jokes in these movies, which makes them 100 times funnier.
I watched 4 movies this week, and Chafed Elbows, which is one of the early ones, is, I think, the second best of the ones I saw. Do you want to tell the people what Chafed Elbows is?
I mean, Chafed Elbows is the day in the life of a young Manhattanite who's in love with his mother. He gives birth to money. He's having a breakdown, and the film is mostly composed of still frames, like La Jetée, and sub-Marx Brothers style pattern.
It's mostly composed of still frame images, but also there's
some color footage, there's some black and white footage, there's some songs. It's just very silly kind of stream of consciousness run-on sentence stuff.
It opens with a big incest joke. him in bed with his mother. Incest jokes recur throughout the film, as well as many other jokes of bad taste.
He's breaking taboos!
There's no plot to speak of. It's, as you said, very stream of consciousness, just one gag after another. Many pop culture references. One thing I'll say in this movie's favor is it's 58 minutes long in the version that's on the Criterion Channel.
And when this came out, people could watch it on a double bill with Kenneth Anger's Scorpio Rising.
58 minutes. If he could have shorn 50 minutes off that, I think I would have liked it a little better.
50 minutes.
I mean, look, if you saw this on a bed sheet in 1966 in somebody's basement, I think that you would have a pretty good time.
So the things that are to its advantage is it is breaking taboos. It's like, I can't believe they're talking about this. And also that it reminds you of stuff like the Marx Brothers. But then you could be watching a Marx Brothers movie.
Watching these Robert Downey Sr. movies, I definitely kept getting the feeling of there's nothing here that Duck Soup or, a W.C. Fields movie didn't do better.
I mean, that's not to compare every comedy to them, but what is Robert Downey Sr. bringing to the medium that is we should continue talking about this kind of stuff?
Well, yeah, as you said, he's breaking taboos. And okay, let me raise this to you. Some months ago, we did an episode on 20 years later, a movement that came out of Lower Manhattan, the cinema of transgression. People like Nick Zed, Richard Kurd, who also did 8mm provocations. I don't know. I maybe this is just a matter of personal preference. That stuff, that transgressive stuff kind of hit me where I live a little bit more than this stuff.
Well, that stuff is even more in your face and is still powerful if you watch it now. Wow, you watch something like Chafed Elbows, you're like, this feels pretty tame. Like a poor episode of Family Guy.
Yeah, I mean, is that later stuff, the Nick Zed stuff, is it more powerful just because it goes a step further to places that we're still uncomfortable with that stuff? Whereas here, yeah, you're right, it is basically an episode of Family. No, it's not even an episode of Family Guy, this stuff.
People are listening to this throwing desks, so angry.
I actually do feel bad about that because we've gotten a lot of listeners over the years who discover us because they search their favorite niche filmmaker on iTunes and then they hear us. And so I do feel bad digging up Robert Downey Sr. just to bury him again.
But we did enjoy Putney Swope.
Yeah, Putney Swope's fun. Even that, I could live without it, but it's fun.
I mean, so Putney Swope is about a black man, the only one on the executive board, is suddenly given control of a whole advertising firm, and he decides to make some really weird commercials. Again, like Chafed Elbows, very stream of consciousness. When you watch it now, you feel I've seen how this has been kind of evolved and used in different formats.
He becomes the chairman of the board because the previous CEO, and by the way, this is a big Madison Avenue advertising agency, one of the biggest. In fact, the poster tagline of the film was "Up Madison Avenue," and it was a middle finger. Some real Adbusters stuff right there.
I mean, you know what? Robert Downey Sr. would agree with you. In the interviews on the Vinegar Syndrome disc, he's like, this isn't very funny. It doesn't measure up to any satire that you could do now.
Straight from the horse's mouth. But anyway, yeah, Putney becomes the head of the company because everybody else on the board votes for him in the secret vote, and they all vote for him because they think nobody else will. When he takes over, he decides he's really going to take charge. He fires everyone from the board and replaces them with black people. He changes the name of the company to Truth and Soul Inc. He puts limits on the kind of products that he'll advertise. So no alcohol, no tobacco, nothing that markets violence towards kids. And much of the movie is taken up with commercial parodies, parodying the kinds of commercials that were popular at the time, but always taking it a step further. A lot of nudity, a lot of sex jokes, a lot of various stuff that would be transgressive to your grandfather.
Breaking those taboos.
It's sort of fun. I like the anarchic spirit of the film. I mean, the fact that Putney eventually becomes this tyrannical, dictatorial style guy, every white liberal's worst nightmare of the Black Panthers, indicates that the satiric point of view of it is sort of all over the place. It's what you'd call an equal opportunity offender.
Yuck. And you do have the principal character played by Arnold Johnson dubbed by Robert Downey Sr.
Which is funny, kind of.
Kind of problematic as well, unless you write your thesis about what that means. Isn't that what Sorry to Bother You would then utilize as well? Speaking of a recent film.
It gives the film kind of a Brechtian quality, doesn't it? The fact that the protagonist of the movie is so clearly dubbed by somebody from a different race.
Putting on a voice too, talking like this the entire time.
Well, you know what? Like father, like son.
So I think that what me and Will are coming down to is that these movies, what's interesting about them is that they are doing the, anarchic style of comedy that has existed forever in Hollywood. It's doing it breaking taboos and also doing it at 0.25 speed.
And it's also doing it in a different context. It's like it's doing it in the underground, like the Marx Brothers, W.C. Fields, whatever. That stuff was the mainstream, and this is like the Robert Rauschenberg pop art painting of that kind of comedy, right? Like, it's repurposing it and saying, well, this can be art, too.
I think that you've been interested in Robert Downey Sr. because you do have that attachment to the 60s art scene, right?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely like the spirit of those times.
But all those people became corrupt and terrible as they lived on through their lives.
Did they? I mean, people like Brakhage and...
oh, that's right, Brakhage.
Jonas Mekas, I think they all kind of, like, continued to fight the good fight in their career. I mean, some of them... I mean, I guess Andy Warhol would go on to like paint society paintings for $25,000 a pop or whatever it was.
I guess that's probably what I start to veer towards, is that like all these idealistic breaking the system filmmakers found that, oh wow, people are actually interested in this. This can become something that is culturally important. I can sell it to the highest bidder and live in giant mansions.
Well, here's what I'll say for Robert Downey Sr. in the early portion of his career. Later on, I think he tried to sell out unsuccessfully. But the stuff that he was making in the early 70s, I watched two of his bids for the mainstream, 1970's Pound and 1972's Greaser's Palace. And they are definitely spiky and uncompromising in their way. And by that, I mean they are unwatchable.
I also feel something like Greaser's Palace is very calculated to like, wait, can we get a cult movie like El Topo out there? This is what the kids like,
yeah,
right?
You're right. It is very calculated. Okay, well, let's start with Pound. This is one that I watched. It's based on an off Broadway play. The gimmick of it is that it's set at a dog pound, but all the dogs are played by human actors. And so like in the opening scene, you go into the pound, you see a bunch of dogs there, and then like with the cut of a camera, suddenly they're replaced by people, and all the people are talking to each other like they're dogs, but they're talking to each other in human speak. Ultimately, the film is a big metaphor. It's a metaphor for us and how we live our lives, and aren't we all really just dogs at the pound? Because these dogs are waiting to be exterminated. They are strays that nobody is going to pick up, and they're like on the conveyor belt to death, basically.
But are there a lot of laughs, Will?
Oh my God. I felt like I was in prison watching this film for 90 minutes.
That's what it was meant to feel like. It felt like you were trapped in a pound yourself.
God. Yeah, I definitely had time to ponder my own existence while watching this.
The choices you've made watching Pound.
I mean, oh my God. I definitely wouldn't have finished it if I wasn't doing a podcast about it. Maybe I shouldn't have finished it, but you've got all of these characters. First of all, the central visual conceit of the movie doesn't work. The sight gag doesn't work. They don't look or act like dogs. They look like people. They talk like people. They interact like people. Every now and then one of them will allude to like having like bit someone or done this or that. But for the most part, no. They just look like a lot of people, and the whole dog gimmick doesn't meaningfully interact with them. And then they're not interesting, and there are too many of them, and I didn't laugh a single time.
Well, so Pound has been forgotten by history, other than being like, oh yeah, Robert Downey Sr.'s follow-up to Putney Swope was a movie where people were dogs.
Wait a minute. There is one thing that is remembered about this movie.
Debut of Robert Downey Jr.
That's right. He's like 5 years old. He plays a little dog who is briefly there. You know, he's a cute kid. And what more do you say about it? Oh, I didn't mention that halfway through the movie, there's like a freak out scene. Like all the dogs like have a big like mosh pit party where they all dance and like hippy dippy music is playing while they're dancing.
Oh, God.
And I wanted to put a gun to my head and pull the trigger during this.
Well, now you've watched it, and every time that you try to go revisit it, you can just, think about those memories.
Yeah, 20 years from now, I guarantee I'm like an Alzheimer's patient. I'm going to put this on. I'm going to be like, yeah, Pound. Robert Downey Sr., he's like a real, like, cool, avant-garde guy. He was a narcotic. I'll forget the awful experience I had with it.
Criterion's gonna turn around and be like, Pound's on Blu-ray now.
Okay, Greaser's Palace. We both watched this one.
We did, because this was like his big kind of swing for the fences, I feel. The one that forever put him on a path of Mad Magazine up the Academy.
Okay. Well, it is a comic retelling of the life of Christ.
Comic.
Well, I don't know what else you'd call it. It's set in the Old West. Imagine if Louis Buñuel was not smart.
Ooh.
Or, yeah, if Alejandro Jodorowsky didn't know how to make a movie.
Well, the thing about Alejandro Jodorowsky's movie is that they're fairly engaging when you watch them, and that there's a lot of stuff to kind of glom onto. Greaser's Palace's main kind of gag is just shooting people.
Also, El Topo is genuinely transgressive. There's a lot of, like, really weird and unsettling imagery in that movie.
And it's also put within a context, El Topo, of like a Western, a quest film that you recognize. And that's what gives it its power when they turn around and they do the really kind of like disturbing stuff in El Topo.
I'll tell you a little bit more about the plot. It's set in this Western town, which is ruled over with an iron fist by a saloon owner by the name of Seaweed Head Greaser. But then, one day, out of nowhere, a mysterious man named Jesse literally parachutes into town. That's right, folks, he parachutes into town. And he's wearing a zoot suit, and he's got a big mustache and a hat.
I'm laughing already.
He's got the ability to heal the sick. He can resurrect the dead. He can walk on water at one point, but he claims that he's on his way to Jerusalem merely to become a song and dance man.
Oh man, I'm looking at a summary here online, and I really hope this was used in the press material somewhere. This ain't your father's Bible story.
Oh no. So that's basically the plot. It's a collection of scenes.
Some of them reoccur, like there's bits that go on throughout, like there's a woman in the desert that keeps being injured. That made me laugh.
But to give you an idea of the general level of humor in the movie, Hervé Villechaize is in this movie. Some listeners may know him as the little person from The Man with the Golden Gun and TV's Fantasy Island.
Forbidden Zone, his most famous role.
Anyway, he's in this movie, and of course his presence is intrinsically humorous because he's a little person.
Oh man, Robert Downey Sr. loves little people showing up in his movies.
He loves people in drag, too.
Yeah, he really likes that. Ugh, God.
And if you got Hervé Villechaize, whose wife is a cross-dressing man, you got laughs for days.
And those scenes go on and on. But what is keeping this, Will, from being anti-comedy? That it pushes it so far that that's what generates the laughs.
What's keeping it from being anti-comedy is not at any moment do I feel riveted by this movie. I want to question the phrase anti-comedy because if it's funny, it's funny. But like putting that aside, just accepting the term on its own. Like if you hear Norm Macdonald at his best, if you see Tim and Eric at their best, you're kind of like on the edge of your seat waiting like how long can he push this? There's a discipline to it. There's a rigor to it. You listen to Neil Hamburger doing 50 horrible jokes to a crowd of like screaming people who want the rock show to start. Like there's an element of suspense. Like how long can he get away with this? Like is the crowd gonna revolt?
He didn't feel like that way watching Greaser's Palace and Pound. How long could he get away with this?
I mean, if Robert Downey Sr. was in front of me while I was watching it, I would have felt it because I would have been wanting to fucking get up and throttle him.
Now you sound like one of those old grandpas who just got back from World War II, don't understand what the kids are doing.
I should say that like this podcast that we do is unfair to these filmmakers because these filmmakers were not meant to be binged the way that we do it. Like if I'm watching Robert Downey Sr. movies one every 3 years as they're coming out, then that would be one thing.
Yeah, but then you'd go to them and you're like, I like Putney Swope. Maybe this one will be good. No, wasn't good. I'll see the next one, I guess.
And yeah, the experience would be less intense. But when you're immersed in this guy and you're watching like 4 of his movies like one after another over 3 or 4 days, wow.
They ain't getting any better. You know what? I have to say, to be a little bit more positive, I liked the look of Greaser's Palace, how miserable it looked. There were some jokes that made me laugh. Like, there's a long shot of them walking and someone does a magic trick and he's like, is this your card? No. 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 That got a laugh out of me. At the end, a guy finally shits and then the whole building explodes.
But I mean, I don't think the man knows where to put the camera. I don't think he's very talented as an editor, as a pictorialist, as anything.
Slap a wide angle on that camera, do it handheld, and it feels like nothing else that's coming out during the time, right? I think that's what Putney Swope gets a lot of drive on.
Like, that's why Babbo 73 and Chafed Elbows are some of the better movies in his filmography, because, like, if you just got an 8mm camera and you're going over to Taylor Mead's apartment, you're going to dick around for an hour and you've got a movie, like, that's where his talent thrives, such as it is. Not when he's, like, actually has to expand his craft at all.
So you think that when there's more immediacy to the work that he was doing, so, like, the earlier work, that it feels more personal, but when he has to sit down and calculate and get through it, that's where he has difficulty with like Pound or Greaser's Palace.
I think the early work has an urgency to it. If you want to be generous to it, it definitely has a feeling of like flying by the seat of your pants. There's some inventiveness, there's some energy, but once he has to like translate his sense of humor into anything with a budget, you realize how lame his sense of humor is and how poor his technical skills are.
Watching Greaser's Palace, I was like, man, I wish I was watching El Topo or Life of Brian or any better version of this. It only gets better from here.
Aren't you glad that we didn't take a look at some of those later ones? Like, you and I watched the trailer to Too Much Sun.
Oh, gosh.
Do you think the Too Much Sun Barrett's mentioning? Because here's the plot of this movie. A wealthy man dies, and in his will, he gives all of his fortune to his children, played by Eric Idle and Andrea Martin, but he specifies that they can only get his fortune if they sire a child. And his two kids are gay. So shenanigans abound. These two gay people have to figure out how to get a kid, and you've got Eric Idle in full like hate speech mode, you know, doing like the swishiest gay voice you've ever heard.
See, the thing with like this movie is I feel like someone like Robert Downey Sr. would be like, I'm breaking taboos like I always did. It's like, no, this is what is text now in mainstream culture. Like, this is not breaking any taboos.
Oh, and it looks so bad, too. His later ones just had this awful, like... I don't know. What am I doing? Why am I beating up on these later movies?
Robert Downey Sr. is like, I haven't directed a film in decades. What are you doing to me, Will? Up the Academy, though. That's a funny one, right?
I did see that one. I don't remember much about it. I mean, what I remember about Up the Academy is in the opening credits and at the end, there is like Alfred E. Newman is in it. Like there's a kind of like...
That's the man I came to see.
It's like, you know, at Disneyland when somebody's wearing a Mickey Mouse costume. It's like that, but for Alfred E. Newman.
Oh my God, a walk around Newman. Scary. All right, so Robert Downey Sr., basically, we would recommend watch Putney Swope.
Yeah, watch Putney Swope. And you know what? If you got an hour to kill, watch Chafed Elbows. Why not?
Mm-hmm. Basically, just pick up that Criterion Eclipse box set. They knew what they were doing.
Putney Swope is pretty fun. The other early ones, they are interesting time capsules of a time and a place. After 1970... no, thank you.
Yeah, no, nothing from Pound onward. Not even Robert Downey Sr.'s America in 1986 or Rented Lips, where a documentary director has to make, what's this, a porno? You know, but I think that it's interesting is that, like, Zaz is essentially what Robert Downey Sr. was doing, and he just could never get there. Get to that, like, Kentucky Fried Movie level.
It's because he wasn't funny. I'm sorry. The proof is in the pudding. He didn't know how to do a joke.
All right. Well, there you have it. Paul Thomas Anderson's going to come after you himself.
All right. Sorry, everyone. Sorry to all the fans who are listening to this for the first time. Please stick around. Listen to our other episodes. There will be stuff that you agree with.
I would love someone to send us a defense of Up the Academy.
I would be heartbroken if Robert Downey Sr. himself somehow heard this.
I mean, he would agree with you that Up the Academy is not good. As he said in an interview that I watched, it should have been 10-year-olds. And I'm like, I don't think that would have made it funnier, Robert.
He seems like a nice man.
He's very funny in interviews.
Yeah, he is. He is. And yeah, what can you say?
So, as per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. And our first letter goes, Dear Justin and Will, huge fan of the podcast. Over the past year, the Cinema Club has provided invaluable inspiration for how to keep me and my 5-year-old son entertained, largely outside of the confines of Disney Plus and Netflix. Uh-oh. At this point for his bedtime stories, we've shifted to making them up, and mostly thanks to you two, it's been the ongoing tale of how the Three Stooges and Calvin and Hobbes teamed up to take on Gamera. Part of me worries such an anti-normie media diet might backfire, the worst case scenario being that he grows up to be a Roberta from Cinemania, but there's only so much I can control.
Oh man, that's a good deep cut reference.
As long as that's not the only thing that your children take in, because I have friends that are like, I'm not letting my kids see anything but the stuff that I liked as kids. That is a bad idea.
You have to let your kids watch the horrible garbage that all their school children are watching, because those are the things that unite a generation.
Yeah, they should be watching stuff like Scooby-Doo, quality cartoons. The letter continues, would love to get your thoughts on the works of Ray Harryhausen. I've only gotten around to his stuff courtesy of my kiddo, the first two Sinbad movies in particular. In fact, given the choices between Star Wars and Sinbad, he prefers the latter. And I don't think he's not off base. Well, I don't know about that. Those Ray Harryhausen have really fun claymation sequences.
Yeah, I would agree with that. They've all got 15 great minutes.
Could be worth diving into his filmography for an episode or at least a Patreon. There's more than a few questions I'd also be curious if you have answers to. How do you explain brown face to a 5-year-old? Is it okay not to point it out as long as the characters are depicted with dignity? Is mild bloodless violence somehow worse and somehow visceral like Harryhausen? When heroes fall, you hear their agonized wails and crunching bones? Why are the films of many of those he influenced in the West, George Lucas, Tim Burton, Peter Jackson, so asexual? While with Harryhausen, you can count on at least one character being a horn dog. Anyway, would love your thoughts, if only so I can make a better argument to my in-laws why it's okay for my kids to be watching this instead of Sesame Street. Keep up the great work, Andrew.
Oh gosh, well, I don't have any kids, and I was kind of relishing the fact that I didn't have to explain brown face or stuff like that to them, but now I see that this kind listener has outsourced his parental responsibilities to me, so...
To us, two childless men. Two white childless men.
I think you would explain brown face to your kid like you would explain any of that. You'd say, that's the kind of thing, maybe they didn't think it was racist at the time, but they, it's frowned upon now, and it is harmful in its way.
Whoa. I would just say it's bad. It was bad then. They knew it was bad.
Yeah, okay.
But they wouldn't get in trouble for it. Also, you can like things that have bad parts about it. The problem is that a lot of people, especially through the internet, their identities are the stuff they like, and if anything of it is taken into question, they're like, no, you're wrong. No, it's bad. You can tell your kid that it's bad. Like, these elements are bad.
No, you're right. I don't know why I was qualifying it. I think I was qualifying it only because it was the whole treated with dignity question, which threw a bit of a wrench into it for me. But yeah, you can tell them it's bad even though they thought they were doing it with dignity.
And I mean, did your parents ever broach that topic? Because I know mine didn't.
I can't remember. I mean, I think I understood from a pretty young age that blackface was heavily frowned upon. I'm not sure where I learned that though. I think it seemed pretty obvious to me.
I know that no teacher or any parent ever told me that. I wonder if that's different now. And those conversations have to be had, right?
I think I probably became aware of blackface through cartoons, because every now and then on one of those public domain VHS tapes you'd get one of those cartoons like Bugs Bunny and blackface, and you what probably happened was I asked my mom or dad why does Bugs Bunny look like that right now?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of when I actually became aware of it as something that was really bad, considering that there was never any discussion in any position of authority, because I used to read Tintin comics, and whoa boy, Tintin goes to the Congo. Yikes. Those are not good. And those were just in libraries, never discussed upon. Yeah, I don't know. But I think that, I guess entertainment dealt with it enough that I became aware of it and this is bad. And I never fought against it being well, I grew up with this. It wasn't a problem then. Why is it a problem now?
Yeah.
What is your position on violence?
I'm in favor of it for me.
Yeah, love it.
But for children, yeah, I guess you shouldn't show them anything.
But he actually asked an interesting question is it worse to see something like Harryhausen where when the people die, they're screaming and you hear sound effects, or is it seeing blood?
Don't know, and I would imagine that it varies from child to child, because you remember, I remember when I was a child, I would sometimes get scared at the most arbitrary things.
From what I've heard of some friends who have kids, I think the discussion is the most important part of kind of parsing entertainment as you watch it and not treating it as a monolith, because Will just said, kids react to different things all the time differently. Every kid my age, when they saw Who Framed Roger Rabbit, scared the shit out of them. There's some scary stuff in that movie. It's bloodless, like Judge Doom being rolled over by a steamroller. But oh man, that gave me nightmares for weeks.
But also kids sometimes like being scared, which is a very difficult tightrope to walk, isn't it?
I think that there's a difference between when I was a kid, violence, when I would see it, seemed like a big deal. Like, I remember seeing Broken Arrow, and I'm like, man, so violent. And I would say that maybe the normalization of it is probably more of an issue. If you're an adult and you're like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter, you just take it in. Where like it needs to feel, I don't know, man, it's tough. I don't have kids and how they react to stuff.
I mean, there are a lot of people who would say that like the bloodless slaughter of a movie like Star Wars is worse morally because it makes violence seem like it has no implications.
I'm trying to think of when I was a kid, like I would like G.I. Joe is more toxic, like fighting with laser guns, join the army. That stuff gets under the skin of a child and becomes like a goal that they want to do because it's something that they associate with, entertainment when they're growing up. Like all those Call of Duty games. Playing on your computer, it's fun. Let me join the army now.
Yeah.
Why are films sexless? Well, people are terrified of sex. Still, to this day.
And yet, cable TV dramas are full of sex.
But I remember reading, there was like an article someone said that's like, I made a TV-safe version of Game of Thrones where I cut out all the nudity but kept in all the violence so my kids can watch it. And as somebody pointed out, they were like, how is that better though? Like, how is violence better than sex? And they were like, I don't know, it just is. And I think that's the way like society has kind of like sculpted our minds up to this point.
I'm also not sure, I mean, I mentioned that there's so much sex on TV dramas, but not that much in movies, and I'm not sure what to do with it. I mean, with the caveat that where we are, movie theaters still are not open because of the pandemic, but like it seems people lost their taste for like going out and seeing erotic thrillers or all those genres that used to be popular.
Well, erotic thrillers were really big on TV in the 90s, Skinamax and stuff like that.
You used to have stuff like Basic Instinct like semi-regularly in theaters. Like there used to be a lot of sex and nudity in movies, but then people seem to suddenly get uncomfortable with that, but they are very comfortable watching it at home, like in their bed while Showtime is playing or whatever.
Well, what you're trying to say is at the next level, bring back porno chic. Let's get used to watching people humping on screen for long periods of time with a crowd.
Yeah, let's all do that.
Wait, didn't you sit in an audience at TIFF watching Gaspar Noé's Love in 3D?
I did see Love at TIFF, as a matter of fact, and I don't remember a lot about that experience. I think, actually, my memory is that I feel like I kind of got used to it pretty quickly. I mean, there's so much sex in that movie that it's hard to, like, sustain a 2.5 hour runtime being like, oh, this is so awkward.
I would also say that, like, blockbuster-wise, the reason there's no sex is because the people that are in charge, they were brought up where sex was to be feared, and now they want to hit something in all quadrants. And, oh my god, all these identities out there terrifies them, so they'd rather just make it sexless. But violence is okay, that's not a big issue.
Oh, also, you can't have sex and have the movie be released in China, which is a huge market, too.
Oh my god, that Chinese market, it's the worst. So, thank you very much for your letter. I hope that you follow every instruction that we said to the letter, like the Bible, and your kid will come up completely normal. And make sure to show them the Three Stooges. That's very important.
Well, I mean, that's the good kind of violence. And in fact, that's the kind of violence that your kid should mimic.
Oh, no. You don't want to see the Three Stooges war.
Your kid should be poking his friends in the eye, should be ripping out huge clumps of his other friend's hair. Picking up a ladder and carrying it over his shoulder and then abruptly turning and then whacking his two friends in the head.
And I think that it's also important because then he'll learn how much it hurts and he'll watch the Three Stooges through a different lens as more of a like Michael Haneke style cinema of cruelty. So our next letter is from Robert Paquez. I apologize if I said your last name incorrectly. I just wanted to drop you guys a little message letting you know that I absolutely love your podcast. Well, thank you. I discovered by way of Gold Ninja Video when an Orson Welles site I follow posted about the other side of Gary Graver. Yes! On the podcast side of things, I am happy and thoroughly impressed with the wide scope and depth of movie subjects you cover, from classics to contemporary, from all over the world. In particularly, I'm a big fan of the Hong Kong film personalities and filmographies you have done your podcast on. Every once in a while, I will come across someone covering Wong Kar-wai and Choi Hark, and they may mention Lau Kar-leung, but never someone like Herman Yao or Anne Hoi. As someone who's seen a lot of Hong Kong cinema, you guys really do know what you are talking about, minus some pronunciations here and there. And it's been a joy to go through your back catalog and catch up. Well, thank you. If I may, I do have a few humble suggestions. I know you have mentioned Johnny To before, but he is ripe for a full-on podcast. He has a lot of critical fame outside of Hong Kong, but it is a name not many people recognize. Well, you know what? And this is not your fault. We have done an episode on Johnny To. many, many moons ago.
We did. I almost forgot that.
But you know what? I feel like, yeah, we could return to it, that there's probably a lot more to talk about, because that was an early on episode. And we have 250 plus episodes that sometimes are not that easy to search. So.
It's hard to keep track. Yeah.
And Young Bu would be an interesting subject. The most skilled of the 7 Little Fortunes, but he never quite reached absolute stardom. In any event, keep up the great work. All the best, Rob. I love it when people send us letters being like, man, you guys, you know your Hong Kong cinema stuff, which is always a plus. That and pornography is usually what we get emails about.
Yeah, we've covered the market on those. What are some other Hong Kong people we should do episodes on?
I mean, Young Bu is really fun. I don't know if he has that much of an artistic statement, just because he did seem kind of like a cog in those machines, but he did do a lot of stuff that I really enjoyed, and he is the underdog of the 3 brothers that include Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung, and him. I mean, we've definitely talked about people like Chang Che, him and his vast filmography. As far as like Hong Kong artists,
You know, I don't think we've done a full episode on Wong Jing, have we?
No, we haven't. And you know what would be really fun to tackle? The Hoi brothers.
Oh, yeah, because they're the big Hong Kong comedians of their day. And Hong Kong comedy notoriously has a hard time translating, a hard time making it across the Pacific. So I would be curious to see what, like, The Private Eyes is like.
I've watched them. They're very funny. They're very, like, goofy and gag based, or as my pal Peter said when we were watching them, this is very boomer humor, and he did mean that in like a negative sense, that it's like from a bygone era.
I remember when I was like a teen and I was watching a lot of the Stephen Chow movies, and I was having kind of a hard time with them at that age. I just couldn't really get on their wavelength, but I feel like now I'm much more like...
Oh man, speaking of an older episode, listen to our Stephen Chow one where Will is not impressed.
Well, actually, I don't think that's true. I actually think I think you're misremembering that episode. I think I said what I just said now, but like Chow was someone who really grew on me over time. You're just remembering it that way because you worship Stephen Chow. You love him.
No, I remember because the only time in this podcast history I went in and recorded a part in the main episode, re-recorded a part, because I was so taken aback by your reaction that I was caught flummoxed when you asked me, well, what are the funny ones then?
Did I say that? Because I mean, I love...
Yeah, you did.
That blows my mind because like I love Stephen Chow. I mean, you know, he's incredibly funny. And I mean, I definitely love him more now than I did when I was a teen. Like when I was a teen, I've had trouble getting on the wavelength of that kind of like really silly humor. But now I love that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, especially that we don't have it anymore either. It's gone. Stephen Chow will never make another funny movie, it seems.
Yeah, it's too bad. Although, man, there's one scene from The Mermaid that I still think about. You know the one I'm talking about.
Well, there's actually 2 good scenes. There's one where someone is hiding in a room, which is classic Chow bits, and there's also one where a squid man has to cook himself up.
That is so funny. And there's funny stuff throughout that movie, honestly, but that scene in particular is a Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think the problem is, and a lot of people have talked about Stephen Chow in this way before, that like he got too popular. He also didn't have the triads breathing down his neck anymore, forcing him to make films. So, you know, he became a Mike Myers of Hong Kong, overthinking things.
Yeah, there is a feeling of some of those 90s ones where it's just like, it looks like they're making it up on the spot, basically.
I mean, they probably are, yeah. And I'll think about other Hong Kong artists that we could tackle because, yeah, I love it. I feel that there's probably a whole bunch of other filmmakers. I mean, how have we not done a Wong Jing episode? Unless I'm forgetting that we did one.
You love Wong Jing.
I love Wong Jing. Speaking of triad-backed filmmakers, woo boy. Anyway, thank you very much for the letter. And what are we doing on our Patreon this week, Will?
Oh, well, speaking of stuff from childhood, speaking of stuff that I used to watch a lot as a boy and my opinion has somewhat evolved on, Super Mario Brothers.
Yes, this has been voted in by the Patreon subscribers, and so we watched it again, did a deep dive into Super Mario Brothers, a film I don't like very much, but somebody else loves. Who is it? You'll have to tune into the episode.
One of the 2 hosts really enjoys Super Mario Brothers.
At patreon.com/The Important Cinema Club. $5, you'll get that episode and the whole back catalog. So what are we doing next week, Will?
Next week, we will be looking at a genre. We will be looking at spaghetti westerns.
Now, this is a topic that Will wanted to do, and I think it's an interesting way to tackle it, because you think it's very vast, and do you feel you have a handle on, like, what spaghetti westerns are beyond Sergio Leone or Sergio Corbucci, which we did do an episode on?
Actually, no, not really. I mean, I know Sergio Leone's filmography very well. I know quite a bit of Sergio Corbucci's filmography, but those 2 filmmakers loom so large. Their work collectively, I think, comprises about of like 90% of the public's understanding and most cinephiles' understanding of spaghetti westerns. But there's so much other stuff, including a lot of stuff that I've just never seen.
So I think that we talked about that you wanted to watch Cutthroats 9, which maybe people listening are like, wait a minute, that's not a spaghetti western, because technically it's a Spanish western, but it's qualified as a spaghetti western. It came around that era. An ultra-violent spaghetti.
And I'm beyond that. I'm kind of up for anything. Like, what are some of the ones that you think we should watch?
Well, it's tough because I want to hit like all the beats that would cover like the wide gamut. I think we need to do a comedy one because that was the death of the spaghetti, but they were incredibly popular, like They Call Me Trinity, the Terrence Hill, Bud Spencer film.
Sure, yeah, let's do that.
I want to talk about like a whole bunch of them that hit different points, like I said, because there are many spaghetti westerns and a lot of them very similar to each other. Anthony Stephan, that guy looks kind of like Clint Eastwood. There's a reason for that. So that's what we'll be doing next week. And until then, my name's Justin DeClue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening. Hello, Justin here. Just want to thank some of our new Patreon subscribers, who include Malia Obama, Kyler Bates, Solomon Fong, KL, Felix Dembinski, and Matt H. Thank you very much for becoming subscribers. We could not do it without you. And we now return to our regular scheduled programming. Will, I recently saw you saw Alex Ross Perry's Listen Up Philip again, a favorite of mine. Did you enjoy it as much as when we talked about him many, many moons ago? I think we tackled The Color Wheel, right?
Yeah, maybe we talked about the first two movies. We did a Patreon episode where we talked about Alex Ross Perry, like really early on, and we were both very excited for him.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the heights that he will hit.
But yeah, I hadn't seen Listen Up Philip, his 2014 movie, in quite a while, and I watched it last week, sort of with some trepidation, thinking that maybe it wouldn't hold up for me. But I thought it was fantastic. And I watched The Color Wheel again recently too, which is the one that kind of put him on the map. And I thought that one was fantastic too.
Oh, so good. Loved The Color Wheel and Listen Up Philip. And like Listen Up Philip seems to be like almost like this is a big swing, but like a crimes and misdemeanor level of like what kind of filmmaker Alex Ross Perry could be, that like all of his preoccupations you saw in just a couple of things he did before that reach fruition right away with his second feature film. Third, if you want to be technical.
I think that's a good comparison. For those who haven't seen it, it has Jason Schwartzman in it as an arrogant young writer named Philip, who has this deteriorating relationship with his long-suffering, very patient girlfriend, played by Elizabeth Moss, and he is suddenly, out of the blue, befriended by his favorite author, his greatest creative inspiration, played by Jonathan Pryce, who is a Philip Roth-type character. And the movie sees him, essentially, as he is ascending literary heights, closing the door on human connection and barreling down the path of becoming the next Philip Roth in every sense of the term.
Have you ever read much Philip Roth?
Well, actually, I'm currently midway through reading The Human Stain because this movie kind of whetted my appetite for some Philip Roth. But I've read like maybe a half dozen Philip Roth books.
I would like to read the books of this broken man.
Yeah, actually, that was kind of my reaction. Maybe I was the wrong takeaway from the movie, but
you're like, Philip, that could be me. I mean, everybody knows a Philip in their life, right, Will? Maybe perhaps you look in the mirror and you see one staring back.
Well, it was great to watch Listen Up Philip again because I definitely, like watching this movie, I think I am less like Philip than I was when I first watched it.
And I think that this movie, I love it. It's so great. And after this movie, you can consciously see Alex Ross Perry made a change that he doesn't want to make funny films anymore. And, oh man, that sucks.
I mean, with those first two, technically the second and third, The Color Wheel and Listen Up Philip, it really looked like he was becoming the modern day Brooklyn Woody Allen. And I would have kind of liked to see him continue to go down that direction.
As a filmmaker myself, not at the level of Alex Ross Perry in the slightest, I can understand his need to kind of do different stuff. But I think that there is a place where he could have made films that are still funny, that still have that acidic tone, but also tackle different genres and different styles. And instead, he just went in the opposite direction. I appreciate Queen of Earth. I don't think it works in the way that he wants it to work, though. His follow-up was Elizabeth Moss, which is a Repulsion style kind of like psychodrama.
Oh, but that one he made after, Golden Exits.
Oh, man. Where did we see it together? Or I think we were in the same theater.
Yeah, we were at that screening at the Lightbox.
We get it, Alex. You want to be Eric Romer.
Yeah, because it was sort of a return to the style of Listen Up, Philip a little bit, but with no jokes.
Yeah, why?
And everybody is talking in this like really pretentious, I mean, I guess it's his interiors, you could say, but not as good as interiors, frankly.
When is he going to make his Stardust Memories where people are like, I liked your earlier, funnier ones?
Well, first he has to become famous.
That's right. Can that happen at any point? Like where he is now, the way that he's gone, like he's become kind of a Hollywood screenwriter, having written such classics as the Christopher Robin movie. Wait, is he credited on it? I'm looking here. Yep, he is.
He is credited, yeah.
I watched that movie last week. Very good.
But yeah, Listen Up, Philip, it definitely brought back the old feelings. And it's like, well, maybe he'll only ever make 2 movies that I really like a lot. But that's fine. It's like Woody Allen didn't have that high a batting average either, frankly, but he had enough home runs that it kind of...
I mean, I enjoyed Her Smell as well, but again, if there were just, I don't know, like a little bit of humanity through some jokes, which he seems to be very good at, but there's a conscious decision that he doesn't want to make those type of movies, I feel. Like somebody maybe said an offhanded comment at a party and it's haunted him ever since. Like, yeah, you know, you make movies, but they're funny movies, like not real movies. And he's been trying to prove that differently since then.
My only problem with Her Smell is that it's unwatchable. The first 3/5 of the movie where it's all like at that fever pitch and it's so intense, and Elizabeth Moss is giving that like, you know, turned up to 11 intense performance. I mean, there's a lot to admire about the filmmaking, but I just hated watching it. I hated being in that space.
Alex Ross Perry's leaning back in his chair and he's like, then I did what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, good job, I guess.
But make me laugh. We preferred your earlier funny ones.
Oh, one more thing about Listen Up, Philip. The relationship between Jason Schwartzman and Jonathan Pryce, the kind of like toxic mentor-mentee relationship that they have, is so convincing, and it's so textured. Like there's a part midway through where Jonathan Pryce has like an older novelist friend over, like, I don't know, maybe like a Norman Mailer type or whatever, and he gives his older novelist friend the really good scotch and he gives Philip the less good scotch, and then towards the very end of the movie, just in a really offhanded moment, he pours Philip another glass of scotch and he says, by the way, this is the 58. Like, finally, Philip has ascended to the realm of being worthy of the good.
But this guy's a loser. Nobody likes him. Why do you want to be this guy?
I know, and that's what's so funny about it. It's like this totally meaningless honorific from somebody who is so petty that he has to introduce the honorific in the first place.
But you saw reflections of your own life in that kind of stuff, or people that you do know. We won't name any names.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't hit so hard if I didn't identify with it.
Yeah, I don't see any of that in my own life because I am a shut-in who has no mentors or any of those figures.
I mean, okay, this is the thing. It's like people listening to this podcast probably think you're the nice one. But, you know, as you say, you're a shut-in. You don't like people.
No, I love people. I don't like social structures or being forced to go to parties while you love parties.
I do. You love like 5 people.
Yes, that's what I like. Because I don't want to have to impress anybody else, or I don't even care what they think, so why do I have to go to these things?
I mean, look, ultimately, I probably only have 5 friends now, too, after the pandemic. I see no acquaintances anymore.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah, I'm trying to think. I have acquaintances or people that know who I am, but yeah.
Not anymore, not after the last year.
That's true. That you're going to go and you're like, who are these people? But yeah, because I never would go to stuff just because, I don't know, man. I think that it all comes from growing up in a French small town through my developing years from like junior high to the end of high school, where I didn't want to be there, didn't want to hang out with anybody, and that just continued onward when I moved into my own life, where I would go, I don't need to follow these social structures because I don't know these people. It doesn't really matter to me. So,
well, some of us just like seeing people. Some of us just like people.
Yeah, I'd rather just hang out and like play a game or with friends.
Fair enough.